Hey, everybody. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us for another episode, this week's episode of Pax Americana. There's so much to discuss. I feel like we should be doing these every day. We can't, but we should because it's like drinking from a fire hose. So thank you to everybody in the United States and around the world for joining us. We have a lot of international viewers because I know how much all of you are impacted by the insanity emanating from our White House. So thank you to everybody. I'm here with Olga Lautman. Olga, we have some good news that I think you want to share first.
So, in this, basically now 74 days of hell, we did a few episodes on this regime pulling funding from Ukrainian children and apparently destroying the database. At least that's what a bipartisan group of how you call it, Congress people thought when they sent the letter. Anyway, so people made a lot of calls. Congress got involved, and temporarily they have restored the aid to Yale for these kidnapped children, because Yale was tracking these kidnapped children, the tens of thousands that Russia has kidnapped out of Ukraine. They restored the funding temporarily for, I believe, 2 months, which gives it enough time to transfer their evidence of genocide and war crimes to European law enforcement. So I wanted to thank everyone for this because it was a huge, I mean, this covering up genocide for the United States. I mean, it's reprehensible, but
Yes,
it
but then,
shows that we can make a difference. All of us together, we can make a difference and slow this sociopathic regime down.
yes, and thank you to all of you because I know there are some people here who surely reached out, as I know that a lot of us did, to bring attention to this. Again, this was done by Marco Rubio, for who got 99 senators. Every single Democratic senator voted for Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State because I think they thought that he could temper Trump. I guess they didn't spend enough time with Marco Rubio in the Senate dining room to know what they were talking about. But nevertheless, Marco Rubio pulled this funding and then ultimately rescinded the rescission of the funding, which is fantastic news. But we have to be vigilant because Marco Rubio, who used to be a big advocate for these children and a big advocate for Ukraine, has of course now completely sold out any shred of integrity he might have had on this issue to curry favor with Donald Trump. So much, Olga, to get into. I just posted something on Substack a few minutes ago that I want to dwell on for just a little short while because there's much more to talk about. But I just want people to be aware. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, last week, or I should say this earlier in March, but last weekend, the Washington Post broke a story that he put out a secret memorandum. And by the way, Pete Hegseth, you should be checking your cup for poison because people clearly at the Pentagon are leaking like sieves against you. So if I were you, I would look twice because there are people out there to get you because they obviously understand what you're doing to destroy their life's work. But somebody leaked to the Washington Post a document that basically says the following. The only thing that we really care about, um, other than in the Western Hemisphere, is China. And the Europeans can deal with Russia themselves. They can deal with all of their own problems. We don't care what happens in the Middle East anymore. We don't care what happens in Europe. All we care about is China and the Taiwan Strait. But then the part that caught my attention, and Olga, I'm sure it caught yours too, but it would only catch your attention if you actually speak Russian or have any kind of knowledge of post-Soviet Russian talking points, is that Pete Hegseth referred to, and I'm going to use all but a direct quote, the Panama Canal, Greenland, and Cape Horn, which is off the southern coast of Chile, all of which are in the Western Hemisphere, is our near abroad. I want to focus for a second on that term near abroad. Near abroad is a Russian term. It is not used anywhere but there, and it refers to the former Soviet republics, 14 others aside from Russia that comprise the Soviet Union, which Vladimir Putin strongly believes are absolutely in his sphere of influence, if not eventually should be part of Russia proper, because as we all recall, he believes that the dissolution of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. So this is somebody who wants to reconstitute the Soviet
And
Union,
he's not the only one. I
and
mean,
he's
this
not the
is
only
a
one.
hard line
Yeah,
Russian school of thought.
right. But the way the Russians refer to Ukraine and Georgia and Kazakhstan, I mean, I don't have to list all of them, the Baltics, some of which are, by the way, in NATO right now, like Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, they refer to those former Soviet republics, all of which are 14 independent sovereign nations now for the time being, as the near abroad. And I caught my eye that Pete Hegseth was using this phrase to refer to Greenland, which we are now threatening to annex, whether the Danes like it or not. Um, and of course, the Panama Canal, which we're now threatening to retake, whether the Panamanians like it or not. And Cape Horn, which is in Chile, which is a new one to me. I didn't realize that Chile was a country that we were trying to annex. But he's referring to that now as the near abroad, and I was like, this is not. As I keep saying, I know Pete Hegseth. I've spent a lot of time with him. I worked with him at Fox News. I guarantee you, the term near abroad has never crossed Pete Hegseth's mind. And I was like, well, why in the world would Pete Hegseth be using this phrase? That document that was leaked to the Washington Post was part of it was verbatim taken from the Heritage Foundation, which we all know is the architects of Project 2025. But more relevantly, and I think very importantly for people to know, that this particular document was written by a man at the Heritage Foundation who then left Heritage and now works for Pete Hegseth as the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Um, what people may not know is that a few years ago, the Heritage Foundation merged with something called the Danube Foundation in Hungary. The Danube Foundation is funded, and I know bear with me here because I know it's confusing, but the Danube Foundation is funded by effectively a nonprofit that is an arm of the Hungarian government. The Hungarian government is run by Viktor Orban. I'm sure most people here are familiar, but Viktor Orban is the prototype of who Donald Trump wants to be. A huge Putin apologist, a wannabe dictator. Um, and what I thought was fascinating about this is that, of course, we all know that Viktor Orban went from being a huge Russian adversary in his first iteration to suddenly, about maybe 15 years ago or so, a little more than that, flying to St. Petersburg, meeting with Vladimir Putin, and like that, like a switch went off overnight,
I'll fill
became,
you in.
yeah, fill us in, became the biggest apologist for Putin. Olga probably knows why. But the point of this story is this is the Putin to Orban to Heritage to Hegseth pipeline. And that's why you have terms that are used only in the Kremlin, like near abroad, now being used by the United States Secretary of Defense. And for the life of me, I don't know if somebody at the New York Times or the Washington Post doesn't have anybody who kind of speaks Russian or has any kind of Russian background. They should. But why the legacy media is not all over this. This is a chilling phrase that the minute I saw it, it literally sent chills down my spine. But Olga, tell me why, because I actually don't know why Orban, I mean, I have my suspicions. I'm sure it's money related or blackmail, compromise related, but why did he suddenly flip from being an anti-Russian guy to being Putin's puppet in the EU?
Just on your comment on legacy media, they do have Russian speakers.
Of
The
course.
problem is that they all, and this is one of the biggest frustrations for Ukrainians, they all reported out of Moscow at one point and basically reported from a Moscow-centric view. And they continue to do this, and this is why you see a lot of the articles always slant. Um, from a Moscow point of view. And then to make things worse, after the full scale invasion, they sent a lot of these Muscovites to Ukraine to report on Russia's full scale invasion. And it was coming out again with this tinge of Russian view.
Mm,
Now, to get back to Orban, I have so much to fill in. To get back to Orban, so there is a Russian mobster. Mogilevich. He touches on Trump.
Yep.
He touches on a lot in Israel. He compromised a lot of people in Mossad and the Israeli government.
Right.
Eventually relocated his operations in the 90s to Hungary.
I believe that's right.
He was such a powerful and well organized Russian mobster. He was considered the brain, of the brains. He was extremely genius with setting up shell companies to help the KGB before the collapse of the Soviet Union to move the $50 billion out because they knew that the Soviet Union was, on its way to collapse and wanted to have money abroad in order to basically rise back from the ashes, which is exactly what happened when modern Russia was born. Mogilevich operated out of Hungary. He set up his base. First, the KGB sent him to Israel under the, anti-Semitism during the Soviet Union. The Soviets released a lot of Jews
Right.
abroad, and they had a choice either to come to the United States or Israel. So first he went to Israel, set up operations there, then moved here. He was such a bad, an important figure that the FBI for over a decade had him on the top 10 wanted list. So while he was in Hungary, he was involved in everything: sex trafficking, human trafficking, narcotics, moving everything that you could think of. While he was in Hungary, according to a colleague who did an excellent investigation, Anastasia Kirilenko, um, he was giving kickback to Orban and a lot of people. At the time, Orban wasn't, the prime minister, but he had, an important role in the government. And apparently Mogilevich, like any good mobster, because just to back up 1 second, what a lot of people don't understand in the West is that the Russian mafia is an arm of Russian intelligence. It always had been, continues to be, and this is like one of those arms where they can carry out operations and have plausible deniability, just like with the criminal cyber hackers, same thing with the criminal mobsters. Anyway, so according to Anastasia's investigation, Mogilevich filmed, handing over $1 million. The story actually is a suitcase with $1 million to Orban. He put it on film. Eventually, Mogilevich, around 2008, went back to Russia. He was arrested um over some, I don't know, dispute with the Kremlin, but he gave Patrushev the video. This video went to the Kremlin. He was released from jail, and Orban was summoned to Moscow. That video must have been played to him, and then after that meeting he came back as like the biggest, Putin cheerleader that you could imagine. So this all actually stems from the Russian mafia, which part of their, you know uh role is to obtain, to carry out and bring back money to the Kremlin via trafficking and weapon smuggling
Right.
and whatnot. But it also involved, just like with Trump, um, it involves collecting compromise, collecting, information of criminalities and sending it back to Russian security services. And then Mogilevich and Patrushev basically became partners in their venture, splitting allegedly 50 percent each on whatever income that Mogilevich continued to bring in. And as a result, he was able to walk around free in Moscow, and to the point that security services eventually, over the past decade and a half, sent him to various European countries and even, gave him like fake documents and made sure that he was protected not to be spotted and arrested. This man is very smart. He had, I mean, I read the 1994 FBI file. He had like, probably at that time 15 different names. This is how smart this man was and how dangerous he was. So this is with Orban and how he fell into Putin's uh, orbit. Then with Danube Foundation. This is a front for, just like you said, this is the front for Orban. What's interesting, Orban, since the full scale invasion, has been, I mean, one of the main obstacles in Europe from having this ultimate unity for support for Ukraine. I mean, he does everything he can do to try to disrupt aid packages, weapon shipments. I mean, anything he could do, he will do. In around November, I believe, 2022, then Newbay gave a lot of money to Heritage Foundation. And from there, they started sending Hungarian agents, which I call them personally intelligence agents, to work with the Heritage Foundation people, to the point that they even had secret meetings on how to sabotage US aid packages. And all of those, including JD Vance, all of these extremist far right politicians, they were part of this heritage project, basically, of trying to disrupt the aid from Congress, and whatnot. And this happened through, 2023, and then, infamously in 2024, when Mike Johnson stalled the aid for several months, giving Russia an advantage. And then eventually, and you saw this, including JD Vance. Again, he represented Ohio, right?
Yep.
um, his main goal in Congress was not his constituents in Ohio, it was to disrupt weapons shipments to Ukraine. I mean, this is how obsessed. And he's an American, no roots to the region, nothing. And his main goal was to not only put out Russia's disinformation, but also disrupt any packages approved in Congress, which he almost succeeded.
And it's not just him. Look, what I always found fascinating, although fascinating is not the word, I found disgusting and traitorous, quite honestly, is that it's not just the Heritage Foundation, which is the kind of brain trust of the Trump administration now. And the Heritage Foundation, ironically, started off, for those people who don't know, as a Reagan
Yep,
muscular foreign policy group. They've been completely taken over and sabotaged
yep,
from within by these Trumpers who've taken it over, took a storied name in conservative politics and have turned it into an arm of the Trump regime. And pretty much the kind of the um, policy shop for the Trump campaign and also for the Trump administration now. But it's not just them, it's also CPAC, which
yep.
had one of their meetings, their annual meetings in Hungary. Now, think about what history books are going to say when an American conservative organization decides that they're going to do a meeting in Hungary because they want the United States, the strongest, most powerful, largest economy, longest democracy in the world, to be more like Hungary. These are the people for whom every presidential candidate who wants to run in the Republican Party auditions. Trump speaks at CPAC every year. Mike Pence spoke at CPAC when he was running, when he was vice president. Vance. I mean, this is the so. This is basically just to say that Hungary itself is Hungary. I mean, whatever. It's a Central European country on the Danube and fantastic. It's not about Hungary. It's who Orban's um, influencer is, and that's somebody much more powerful than Vladimir Putin, who's sitting in the Kremlin.
Yep.
And these dots are not hard to connect. It's not like Olga or I have access. Well, maybe Olga does. I certainly don't have any access to any top secret information. This is all stuff that is readily available, and not stuff that's available in conspiracy theory blogs.
No.
Stuff that is readily available in the mainstream media. It's just that nobody wants to connect these dots.
Yep.
And much like and before we move on to, I think, the most outrageous thing this month or this week or maybe this year, which is the
Decade.
arrival of Putin's henchmen in Washington to be feted by this administration. But before we get to that, because it's Liberation Day yesterday, and because this
Do you
country
feel
is
liberated?
I feel my 401k certainly feels unliberated. But but because it's what I call inflation day here in the United States and around the world, and again for the people who are joining us from around the world, devastated that it has come to this, that we are now placing these kinds of tariffs on each other, or if you haven't placed them on us yet, you should. But that we're placing them on you. And so, again, as an American, I'm deeply embarrassed that this is the man sitting in the White House. But
Yep.
everybody's like, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? This is such bad economics. And does he have people around him? I think people are missing the point here. And I think it's something that you and I should discuss because it has a lot to do with what you and I
Yes. Yeah.
discuss every week. He is doing this because he is a thug in the vein of Vladimir Putin. And what he is basically saying to every business and every sector is what he said to big law firms. Either you give me X amount of dollars in whatever I want it to go towards, or I'm going to put you out of business. That's done with law firms. Law firms are, there's some big law firms, but they're not multi-billion dollar corporations. What he's doing with every single business and every single sector is saying, you can get an exclusion here. You can get a waiver, but it's
Amy.
going to cost you.
Yep.
And that's how Putin became the richest man in the world. Just so people know, right? Everybody doing business in Russia, there had to be a vig for Vladimir Putin.
Yep.
And that's how Trump's not stupid. He's many things, but he's not stupid when it comes to this stuff. He's not stupid in knowing how to monetize every single experience of his life. He's monetizing this either for his own personal gain or for some Pax gain that's going to then, give Melania. Listen, he's monetizing this so that Melania gets a $40 million check for her life story from Amazon, Exhibit A, right? I mean, like you wanted to, and that's, do you want to put money into my crypto account? I'll give you a waiver. I will give Corporation X a waiver if I get a VIG in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And I'm not going to give Corporation Y a waiver if I don't get that kind of VIG. This is crony capitalism in the most banana republic third world way. So for everybody who's sitting there thinking, why, don't they understand talking about the Smoot-Hawley Act and how bad the Smoot-Hawley Act was back in 1930 and how deep in the Great Depression and how can we do this and how we learned our lesson? Stop that. Stop that. Because the only thing you should be looking at is how Vladimir Putin became the richest man on earth and how Donald Trump has Putin envy when it comes to that. And instead of doing anything to stop Putin, he's not going to beat him, he's going to join him. That's how it works.
Two things to go back to CPAC, just to connect a
Yep.
few more dots. CPAC has been co opted by Russia. Russia has been running influence operations and various operations through the far right in Europe, connecting into the US. I honestly investigated, the far right networks across Europe into the US, looking for Russia's reach. And God knows, you don't have enough. You would need a big team to map it out because of how much extensive this network is. But just to connect dots for the people in America, Steve Bannon worked for CPAC, and Steve Bannon also collaborated with what I hate that American media calls Alexander Dugin, Putin's brain, but he is a ultra nationalist, sociopath, fascist, and Steve Bannon worked, closely with him. They actually wanted to set up a monastery in Italy. Thank God the Italian government blocked it. To basically have this like boot camp of indoctrinating people to send them out across Europe to basically, push Russia's far right agenda and to overthrow democracy. So Bannon worked for Orban. Tucker Carlson's father worked for Orban.
Yeah.
And it's no coincidence we saw Tucker Carlson hosting CPAC from Hungary, because that's another. So this again all falls into the Russian, you know, uh like orbit, and you see Russia behind the scenes pulling the strings. Now, to touch on the economy quickly before we move on to the explosive, infuriating story. You and I have already had several of these, and and we keep saying Trump is a Russian agent. And for me, I'll take it even a step further. If Russia or China or anyone had an agent in the White House as the most powerful person, what would they do differently? Because Trump is imploding the American economy. He, for God's sakes, I mean, canceled Meals on Wheels and is making sure that senior citizens and children, disabled, and, the weakest among us pay for, suffer. He, is destroying our image on the world stage, destroying every single alliance, threatening to attack NATO countries or Greenland that is under NATO protection. So for me, I mean, the fact that I see the far right and the whole mega, crew throwing out globalization is over. This is another Russian term. I mean, this is something for decades that they have peddled about this globalization and trying to disrupt and, destroy globalization. The fact I see this being pushed on social media by people who don't even know what the hell globalization means is another, basically indicator that Trump is destroying the economy for Russia and for our adversaries. I mean, he's destroying everything for our adversaries. And at the same time, he'll become extremely rich and follow in the footsteps of Putin by, like you said, collecting, kickbacks for issuing waivers for various companies and law firms and whatnot. So I think this is an extremely dangerous point, and I just don't understand how people here are not screaming from the rooftops. I mean, the man walked in, we're in day 74, and this America, over the past decade, America has become very polarized and unrecognizable. This is pure destruction. Every single agency, the obliterating the science community, vaccines, first response for FEMA. I mean, this is everything to basically destroy this country to a point. This is not even an ideological purge. This is full destruction. So when there are wildfires, we're not going to have a response. For God's sakes, Noah. I mean, uh, they are attacking Noah to the point that Noah has, people have issued statements. They're not going to be able to give accurate weather forecast or alerts for, tornadoes and hurricanes because there's not enough weather balloons going into the sky because they had to cut back. I mean, the man is attacking every single thing to make sure that this country is left like worse than Russia. I mean, there's going to be a collapsed, failed state, and I don't get why people aren't just like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, look, I think people are focusing on their own immediate problems right
Yeah,
now, and it's gonna listen.
which is
It's
part
gonna
of the plan
right,
to
which is
make
part of the plan,
everyone
but
pain.
the problem is that their immediate problems are going to start piling up as a result of this,
Yeah,
right? And you can't
yeah,
get your social security check when your hospital shuts down in the rural community that you live because Medicaid's gutted, and so it doesn't have the money to stay afloat. When your food prices continue to go up because of these tariffs or because he's kidnapping and disappearing people in the fields who pick your strawberries. I mean, all of this is going to eventually come home to roost. As you said, it's only day 74. And people are already, I mean, look, usually, and I do politics for a living, so this I actually know like the back of my hand. Usually the first 100 days you have your honeymoon period. Look what's
yeah.
just happened. Look what happened in the first 70 days. Before the 70th day, Republicans lost a state Senate seat in Pennsylvania they've kept for generations. Part of that district is in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania is where the Amish live. It is so conservative that no Democrat had been elected there since 1899.
Oh,
And now a Democrat was just elected there. So that happened last month. Now, on Tuesday, you had in the two Florida districts, Democrats getting about 50% more of the vote in these very hard right districts than Trump did. I mean, they really cut his margins in half, more than half.
yeah.
And one Wisconsin, a state that Trump won, not in a close race, but by 10 points for that state Senate seat. Sorry, for
Thank
that
you,
state Supreme
Musk.
Court seat. So yeah, thank you, Elon Musk. So my point is, I would think about April 1st, which is the day that Cory Booker went on the floor and filibustered. and the same day that those elections took place, I would think that is a day that we should bear in mind, and it kind of gave me optimism, a
Okay.
little optimism, because if that's happening already without the full effect of these policies being felt by Americans, it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It's going to
No.
get worse. And so I think what we need to consider is that it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And at which point, and this is the part that I think scares a lot of people, at which point does Trump simply just seize power because he will not want the American people to have a say in what happens next? Um, that's something to consider. And when does Congress wake up and take back its prerogative
They
to
could
do what
stop
they're
him
doing? It's not.
at
It's not going
any
to happen.
point.
They're going to invoke the nuclear. They're basically getting rid of the filibuster, just so people know. They're going to invoke the nuclear option on these Trump tax cuts, which will be the end of the filibuster. Um, so they're going to go overboard, and they're nothing if not. I mean, people in Congress are not cult members like a lot of MAGA people are around the country. They know who he is. This is just
Hmm.
self-preservation for them. They're gonna have to start kind of weighing what's more in their self-preservation interest. Is it to not have a well financed primary by Elon Musk and Trump against them? Or is it to lose a general election that they should never have lost in places like Maine, where Susan Collins is from, and places like North Carolina, where Tom Tillis is from? These are senators who are on the brink right now, and they're
And
both
that
up.
I have
Yeah.
hope because Elon Musk is the most hated person, I think, in the globe
Yeah.
right now.
Where Elon Musk,
And
yeah, where Elon Musk went
his money
wrong.
is going to be toxic. So, I mean, we saw it in Wisconsin play out. And I mean, had he stayed out of that race and not thrown $25 million and have a whole operation on top of that, plus handing out $1 million checks and $100 checks, maybe the Wisconsin results would have been a lot more closer. But because he's so publicly put himself there. So maybe that is something that will give pause to Republicans that uh, his toxicity, even if he does primary them, I mean, it'll like they'll have a
Yeah.
better chance with their voters if they
Here's
do
where
the.
Elon Musk went wrong, and I'm sure he'll correct for the future. Where Elon Musk went wrong is he did not put money into a super PAC that would never have been disclosed. Because thanks to a law we have in this country called Citizens United, anybody can write an unlimited amount of money to what's known as a 501c4 PAC that will never be disclosed. So that's why it's called dark
Yeah.
money. And that money could have been spent in the service of whoever Elon Musk wanted to elect without anybody knowing it came from Elon Musk. But Elon Musk decided, because he's mentally, I think, deranged
And a
and a
narcissist.
narcissist, that he had to make himself the star. That it's
Yep.
not enough to control people from behind the scenes and be like a little puppeteer, that what he had to do was actually go out there and become the star of the show. And if Elon Musk wants to continue having influence in the Republican Party, which he already has through Twitter and so on, but if he wants to continue having real influence with the money that he has, he'll get off the stage and move on into doing it the way a lot of his cohort does it, which is quietly into a super PAC without anybody finding out. But we'll see. We'll see. But I want to
Hopefully,
focus.
hopefully
Yeah.
he won't.
Hopefully he
Hope-
won't. I mean, I just I just gave him a roadmap, but I'm sure other people have
Yeah,
too. But
hopefully he won't. And luckily there's
yeah,
so many eyes on him that at
yeah,
this moment he can't, make a step without people discovering. So hopefully he won't. Hopefully his narcissistic, because that's like Trump. Imagine Trump doing something from the background. I mean, he needs to be front and center,
yeah.
and trying to get the credit and whatnot. Anyway, so
So let's talk about the
oh,
most outrageous thing that happened just this week. And why don't you tell people who arrived or who's about to arrive here in the United States in Washington D.C. and why?
So, Putin has a very close, I basically call him his wallet and his messenger, Kirill Dmitriev. Interestingly enough, for decades he was whitewashed on CNBC and whatnot. He runs Russia's one of Russia's sovereign wealth funds. Um, so he There's a little background to this. So he is extremely trusted by Putin. The reason he's so trusted by Putin is because Kirill's wife went to school with Putin's daughter. So, I mean, it's a very close click. And in Russia, for the most part, the only way that you actually make it anywhere is who your family is. If you know someone who knows someone, then there's no merit-based system. It's basically on trust, on using networks and whatnot. It's always been like this, and this is how people even got to university in the Soviet Union, and now into good universities. It's by who you know. So this Kirill guy is an important figure. He's one of Putin's, like I said, inner circle. Um, he came up in the 2016 election, and I'll take everyone back for a moment. And after Trump won the election, and after Russia attacked and ran a multifaceted operation to get him in office, and clearly stated their goal was to get him in office. After every single intelligence agency in US came out with the assessment that Russia did attack our 2016 election, and that they with the intent of putting Trump into office. That December, during the transition, Jared Kushner and Michael Flynn had a secret meeting with Russia's then ambassador to US, Kislyak. So they have this meeting, and one of the goals of the meeting was obviously removing sanctions, because Obama had just kicked out Russian spies, basically under the guise of diplomats, seized a few Russian compounds in U.S., and put sanctions on them for attacking the 2016 election. So one of the goals was obviously sanction removals, but another interesting thing happened at that meeting. Allegedly, Jared Kushner told the Russian ambassador to Moscow um, that he wanted to set up a back channel through the Russian embassy to communicate and avoid U.S. Intelligence. This is what U.S. intelligence actually picked up when Kislyak was reporting back to Moscow. The other thing Michael Flynn proposed. Now, this meeting happened, I believe, the first week of 2016.
And
Um,
can I just interrupt you for a second,
mhm.
just to because I want people to focus on this. This was widely reported at the time. I know so much other crazy stuff has happened since then, but it was widely reported that Jared Kushner was trying to establish a back channel through the Russian embassy, and that this information was not reported to the United States government by Jared Kushner. It was intercepted on a Russian, basically through us spying on the Russians. That happened under the Obama administration.
Mhm.
Trump gets in, Jared Kushner becomes a very important person. Never in the entire 4 years that Joe Biden was president did Congress ever investigate any of this.
Yep.
While the Republicans were running around about Hunter Biden's computer,
Yep.
laptop, never. If you want to know a massive abdication of responsibility, it is by the former president of the United States, Joe Biden, and by the Democrats who controlled Congress at intermittent points during those 4 years, where they could have launched their own investigations into this. The reason you don't remember this, most likely, what Olga's talking about, is because nobody talked about it after that story broke in late 2016. It just was
Yep.
not discussed because nobody in positions of power put any kind of spotlight on it. But just sit with that information for a moment. The president's son-in-law wanted to establish a secret back channel with the Kremlin through the Russian embassy. Okay, continue. Sorry.
And just to add, if you and I ever did this, we'd be arrested. I mean, we'd be
Arrested
charged.
immediately.
We would be
Immediately.
arrested. You're not allowed to work for, not even our allies. I mean, whether you're trying to establish, contacts, back channel communications, through the British embassy or the Russian embassy, ally, adversary. The whole point is if you're trying to
course,
avoid US intelligence
of course,
by doing this and moving information, this is a problem.
of
So
course.
yes, I mean, I honestly, frankly, there are so many things that I say, what the fuck? Because if
Mhm.
anyone did even something smaller than this, if you met, forget even that, if you just, said, how about we establish a back channel at this bench on Central Park, and meet there, this you get arrested. But apparently, yeah.
And again, I just want to stress, like, everybody moved on from that. The media
Yep.
moved on from that. And people now are probably hearing on this chat, I see people are having this reaction like, what the fuck
Exactly. What the
indeed.
fuck
Wendy,
indeed.
yes, you're right, Wendy. We see what you said. Uh, like, the reason you're shocked by this is because there's only so much bandwidth anybody's brain has, and if you only heard about it in passing once in 2016 when the media reported on it. I think it was the Times or the Post, I forgot, but some big somebody broke it, who was,
Post,
did,
yeah.
yeah, the Post. And then everybody kind of moves on. Of course you're going to be shocked 10 years later, 9 years later, but the reality is we should have been shocked about this all along, and the Democrats should have investigated this all along. This is a major national security breach. Instead, for some reason that is a mystery to me, Jared Kushner has been off limits for all these
Yep.
years. But anyway, go
Yep.
on. So,
So, at that same meeting, and I'll get back to this visit,
yeah,
but this is a very important thing to set the, background to it. At that same visit with the Russian ambassador, Michael Flynn had the genius idea of having a meeting in a third party country, not under US surveillance.
up. What did
Thing
you?
out of that meeting is they did not want US intelligence to intercept anything that they were doing with the Russians. Well, fast forward a few weeks later, and that third party meeting came to fruition in the Seychelles. And who attended that meeting?
Eric
Eric Prince, on
Prince.
behalf of the Trump regime, and Kirill Dmitriev, Putin's messenger, money bags, whatever you want to call him. But that's who the meeting. Plus, I believe this guy, Nader, who was arrested for sex trafficking and illegal donations to the
Bush
Trump
Nader. Yep.
campaign,
Yep.
and MBZ. So this meeting took place, and this was the first time that probably people had, heard Kirill's name, whoever follows Russia and US, at that time in 2017. Fast forward during COVID. Kushner, we were struggling. I will never forget this. I swear to you. And again, another unexplainable thing that never got attention. Trump came out during his rants. You remember he was doing daily COVID rants. He came out and one day says Russia's sending a big, beautiful plane of humanitarian aid for us. Now, I had seen, he said he had just gotten off the call with Putin. Naturally, I went to the Russian media, to the Kremlin, and I pulled and actually still have a copy of the Russian readout of what happened during the call. Then Trump says this about this big, beautiful plane. People ask in Russia, like, whoa, you're sending a plane to United States? Everyone is lost because at this point, well, Trump used to give these briefings around 6 p.m. here, and it's overnight in Moscow. Everyone is lost. Some even joked, like in RIA Novosti, oh, he's imagining this, he's probably embellishing, there's no plane. And then suddenly, when everyone wakes up in Moscow, they changed the Kremlin readout to add that there was a plane leaving to come to US. So this plane comes to US after stopping, and I remember I didn't even sleep that night. I was stalking this plane. After stopping in Scotland for refueling, it flies to eventually gets to JFK. Basically, they sent combustible ventilators because Russia at the time had a problem. They during COVID, because as with everything else in that collapsed state, their ventilators were basically blowing up and setting fires to the hospitals. These are the ventilators they chose to give us with some cleaning gloves. And who knows what was on the plane? Whatever it
Mm.
was, this was not the reason. But Kirill Dmitriev came out and said, "Oh, I spoke with Kushner. I personally am paying for this humanitarian aid to the United States." And it was like a big, like, to basically whitewash Russia and elevate Russia as being some big humanitarian player. So that was the second time he came up, and again, never investigated what was on the plane, because now recently we found out that Trump was sending COVID tests back to Putin while we didn't have any. So as Americans were dying and couldn't get a test, Trump took the liberty of sending COVID to, and Trump was telling Americans not to take a test. He sent COVID tests back to Putin and his entourage. So that's the second time. Now, fast forward, Kirill Dmitriev is one of the main negotiators along Russia's security services, Beseda, who's a FSB deputy director, and they have been meeting in Saudi Arabia. Now, Dmitriev has a very, very, very close relationship with Saudi authorities. I mean, this is their pipeline, which, has always made me wonder, is this where Kushner got this $2 billion from Saudi? Did Dmitriev and the Russians have anything to do with that deal? Anyway, the Saudi Arabia has been the chosen place for these, sham negotiations to basically try to make Ukraine surrender. And Witkoff has been flying to Saudi Arabia. He went to Moscow. We discussed last week his,
Steve Witkoff, by the way, who's got no official
no, a real estate, a
title.
corrupt real estate guy.
I mean, understand he's on these text messages with the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the head of the CIA, the head of the NSA, uh, and
DNI.
yes, the director of DNI. He's a real estate guy in New York. This would be like
Mhm.
putting any of us on these chats. But
and we'd
yet, as Olga
and
points
we'd
out,
have more sense not
we'd have
to.
more sense not to put Signal on our personal phones or fly to
Yeah.
Moscow and meet with Putin and think that we're not
Hmm.
going to be compromised. But so I just want people to also understand when we talk about Steve Witkoff, we're not talking about somebody who's been deputized as an undersecretary of state or the head of the CIA or somebody
Nope.
who would typically be sitting in these kinds of meetings and leading these kinds of negotiations. We're talking about a guy who is a for profit real estate agent who is not leaving his business to go join the administration because he wants to serve his country. He's continuing to be a for profit real estate agent.
Yep.
And this is a side gig.
Yep.
Why would you have a side hustle if not to make money, right? I appreciate the side hustle. We've all got one. But it's to make money. It's not to serve the United States. Otherwise, he would have quit his real estate job and go join the administration to serve the United States. But anyway, go on. Sorry.
Yep.
Continue.
No, and not only that, he's become a full-fledged Kremlin asset. I mean,
Yeah.
everything that Steve Witkoff has repeated, attacking the Brits for their plan to protect Ukraine, claiming that all of Eastern Ukraine, these people want to be with Russia. This is a lie. This is a fucking lie. This is a lie. Russia has tortured, and I mean,
Of
that's
course.
another show.
Yeah.
But since their annexation of Crimea and occupation of parts of eastern Ukraine and Donbass. I mean, they have set up concentration camps, tortured Ukrainians, stolen their land, stolen their property, stolen their children. So, I mean, no, no, Ukrainians do not want to be part of Russia. You have Steve Witkoff, who literally is carrying on and repeating everything that Russia tells him, and that Putin is a great guy, and oh my God, Putin, commissioned a portrait of Trump that I just brought back. And nonetheless, on Tucker Carlson's show. I mean,
Yeah.
this is on Tucker Carlson's show. Another Kremlin propagandist who went to Russia to show how beautiful the supermarkets are, as if we don't have supermarkets in the United States and actual,
Well, they took him. Listen, as somebody who's from, was born in Moscow, I haven't been there in a very long time, but it's always been a Potemkin village. Of course, the center of Moscow is beautiful and stunning, and that's where they took Tucker Carlson. Much like if I
yep.
wanted to give a tour of New York City, I take you. I know exactly where I take you. I know exactly where I wouldn't take you, so you couldn't see some stuff. But let's put that aside for a moment. I just, staying on Steve Witkoff for a second.
A real estate guy.
A real because he's not because he doesn't work for the government. He doesn't have to actually disclose his finances or file any kind of paperwork. So if somebody wanted to slip him an envelope, as long as he, I guess, reports it to the IRS, although I'm pretty sure he wouldn't get audited by
There
this
is no
IRS.
IRS. They're being gutted
There's
right
no
now.
IRS to audit you anymore,
Yeah.
or at least for that cohort. I'm sure the rest of us will probably
Yeah.
see a lot more audits now. But there's no reason on earth why this guy should be having any kind of contact with the president of the Russian Federation in any way, shape, or form. I mean, this is not Henry Kissinger doing shuttle diplomacy here, right? This is a realist, I mean, truly, and not a real estate guy. You're not even talking about like the Tishman Spires of New York City. I mean, you're not talking about a real estate guy. This is like a second tier, third tier real
He's
estate guy.
like Trump, a
Yeah.
sleazy real estate guy who
Yeah. I mean, it
will
doesn't
do
matter
whatever.
if he was the greatest real estate guy in the world, he still shouldn't be doing this. But nevertheless,
Exactly.
yeah. Anyway,
Exactly.
go on. So
So he met with Putin a few weeks ago, and then um, there are three important things that happened over the past week. One, Kirill Dmitriev landed in Washington, D.C. The man is under sanctions for funding Russia's genocidal war in Ukraine. He landed, and not only did he land yesterday in Washington, D.C., he is having a meeting with Witkoff in the White House. I mean, I wish someone could wake me up from this nightmare. You have Putin's messenger and money man
here's Bagman.
coming here, having sanctions temporarily lifted to have a meeting in the White House as Russia is dropping missiles and drones and hitting hospitals. I mean, if anyone who's monitoring what's happening in Ukraine, there have been several. Deadly attacks over the past, week. Any snapshot, any time frame you look at, Russia is throwing missiles and drones, and people are dying. This man is in the White House, gets welcome to the White House, welcomed, and with sanctions temporarily lifted. The second thing about Dmitriev is that as Trump and Witkoff are trying to extort Ukraine of rare earth minerals, and basically, which I still think they're cutouts for Russia, Dmitriev is in discussions with Trump and Witkoff and the rest of this frickin', Russian owned gang about a rare earth mineral deal with Russia in illegally occupied Ukrainian territories. So these are one of the things on the table in yesterday's discussion. Third thing, Dmitriev last week basically floated the idea that Russia wants to collaborate with Elon Musk to do a joint Mars mission. So, was Elon Musk at these meetings yesterday? Is he now participating?
Probably.
So this is what happened. And to finish this point up, Dmitriev, a sanctioned war criminal, came to the US yesterday. The morning, yesterday morning, Putin has very close, childhood friends, the Rodenberg brothers. Very close. He knows them. It's his inner circle. Like in Russia, like Putin has his very close inner circle he
His St.
trusts.
Petersburg crew, yeah.
Yep. So these Rodenberg brothers are both sanctioned. Actually, one of them had the contract to build that Kerch bridge that I wake up every day hoping that it gets blown up by the Ukrainians. Um, the other brother, I mean, these are the most powerful people in Russia. As Dmitriev was flying to the United States, Treasury quietly lifted sanctions off of Boris Rodenberg's wife. And in an investigation, and I mean, it's known you don't need an investigation, but I guess it's good to be armed with more facts. You know, she was moving her husband's money. She was shielding her husband's assets. This is how it, I mean, works in Russia. Anyone, who is moving money, particularly if they're sanctioned. They have their mistresses with companies, their children with companies, their wives. This is why, for over a decade, I've been screaming you can't just sanction the oligarch or the businessman. You have to sanction the whole family because, this is their scheme. So, as Dmitriev was flying to the US, Treasury quietly took sanctions off of the wife of Putin's best friend.
You know, uh, they're very smart because what they do is they flood the zone, right? So you can't get outraged about any one particular thing. The press can't focus on any one thing. They run like, little rabbits from one outrage to the next. But if you're if
Penguins.
you're if you're kind of focused on what I think, and I know that you probably agree with me on this, is happening, which is, I've always said I actually don't care if Donald Trump is an asset of the Kremlin explicitly or not, because it doesn't really matter. What he's doing right now, for whatever reasons he's doing it, has the same effect, right?
Yep,
Like as you pointed
absolutely.
out earlier in the show. But if you think about the details of this, the fact that they have a private real estate citizen meeting with a private citizen of Russia, both of whom are meeting on behalf of their respective presidents. The fact that Elon Musk, who speaks to Putin on the phone all the time by his own lawyer's admission, we're not sure about what, um, is sitting in these meetings potentially. And the fact that these people are on signal chats, which are supposed to be top secret, beyond top secret, with
Now
military war.
20 of them.
Right.
20.
20. Well, I
Huh,
don't know. Was Wyckoff on the was Wyckoff on those two? On the
probably.
Yeah,
I would not be
who knows?
surprised.
Right.
Yeah.
But my point is, like, at least the one we know about. And everybody kind of forgot about the Wyckoff role here. But Steve Wyckoff, a private citizen, a for-profit real estate person, was right in on military secrets that had to do with when and how we were going to bomb the Houthis. And that was happening while he was in Russia, meeting with the president of the Russian Federation. Like, nope, because people kind of talk about this. Oh, yes, Steve Wickoff was in Russia. Mr. Wickoff, I can just see the Times or whoever, Mr. Wickoff, comma, real estate, investor, comma, was meeting on behalf of the president of the United States. Like, nobody has actually stopped to like, what just irritates me so much about how the media is handling this is nobody actually stops to connect what is so plainly out there. Again, we don't have any kind of secret information here. This is all stuff that's been reported, but it's not, the dots are never connected. It should not be the two of us who have to sit there and connect the dots for the people who watch us. We appreciate everybody watching, but I mean, the megaphone is much larger
Yep.
by the New York Times or the Washington Post or by Congress. I mean,
Yep.
God bless Cory Booker. He's a friend, he's a former client. I am deeply grateful to him for what he did. But where is the ranking member of the relevant committee, whether it's intelligence or foreign affairs, not to say that they need to disclose any top secret intelligence information, standing up and just putting attention on this, because while you're sitting there worried about whether a transgender woman is using your bathroom, this country is being sold out piece by piece by piece by piece. Actually, not even by piece. Eventually, I mean, wholly sold out to Vladimir. I mean, this is like to the Russians. Whether it's what I talked about with heritage, whether it's what you just talked about with this meeting in the White House with Steve Witkoff again, of course, and of course, the president's going to swing by. Of course, he is. Well, actually, yeah. I mean, he left.
Absolutely.
He left for Florida today. He was there yesterday. Whether it's Pete Hegseth giving military plans on a signal chat to Steve Wickoff, a private citizen. And by the way, everybody's focused on the fact that it was on Signal. I don't care if it was the most secret, secure communication in the world. Why is Steve Wickoff on these chats?
Exactly.
Like, why is nobody
Exactly.
asking that question? Like, I don't, they could have gone to a SCIF, which is a secure room somewhere in the Pentagon or in the White House, and it was State Department, they all have them. They could have had this meeting in the most secure SCIF of all. If Steve Wickoff is there, why is nobody asking the question of why is a real estate investor from New York City who has no official role with this government, who does not have to disclose any conflicts of interest because he has no official role with this government, why is he
And
read
looking
in
to
on these
profit
discussions?
with Russia.
Yeah, why is he read in on these discussions? Has anybody asked Steve Wickoff whether he's profited off of this relationship?
Yep. And just to add, the reason, besides I always, connect the dots to give a fuller story, but the reason I took everyone back to Seychelles meeting is because now they don't need to do it. There are no more guardrails. They don't need a third
Yeah.
party country. They don't need the Russian embassy to avoid US intelligence agencies. Now they could do it openly in the White House. And that's it. So whereas in 2016 and 17, they had guardrails and did feel the need to hide their communications with the Russians, meet in third party countries, now they're so brazen that they're doing it openly and basically saying, and what? And the media is failing too. I mean, frankly, where was the press pool watching as Dmitriev was walking into the White House, asking, "What the fuck are you doing here?"
Well,
um,
I'll tell you
how
something.
long are your sanctions lifted for?
Yeah,
You know?
I'll tell you something. They I was just on CNN this morning and it was like all tariff all the time. And tariffs, 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 Elon Musk, more tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. I'm not suggesting that tariffs are not a huge story. I'm suggesting that you might want to, walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yep.
And this is critical information for people to have because back in the day, you would get fired. I mean, we had a national security, we had a national security advisor to Donald Trump, the very first one, who was fired for not disclosing he was having discussions. Who was he having discussions with? Turkey? Was that what he Erdogan or something? He was
Uh,
fired. Um,
maybe Kislyak.
maybe, but
Yeah.
back then when we had these norms, he was gone.
Yeah.
Now it's just been normalized. And the
Yep.
press and our leaders in Congress on the Democratic side apparently also kind of normalized this.
And they need to wake up because these are such dangerous actions. They need to push back. They need to highlight this. This is absolutely incredible. This is not, I mean, coming from that of remembering how the Cold War was. I mean, when I was in this country during the 80s, a little kid,
Yeah.
people used to be called, oh, you're a commie,
You're a
you
commie. I
know?
got called a commie all the
And
time.
I used to be called a commie. People made fun of my name because I was probably the only Olga at the time in Brooklyn. And people,
Yeah.
you know what? I actually welcome it because people took Russia, the Soviet Union at the time, as a serious threat. Now, things that people used to be arrested for are just happening out in plain sight, and people aren't even discussing it, and it's normalized. I mean, something like this, even 15 years ago, this would have been a huge national scandal and a security breach. Now, it gets,
It's not
a
even on the front
headline
page.
here, a headline there, and that's it.
Yeah.
And the last thing before we go, that I want to talk about, and I think this is very important for people who don't know how Russia's press pool is. I mean, it's really handpicked people who ask, basically know what questions to ask. If the Kremlin wants you to ask questions, they'll, give you a list. Make sure you touch on this, and that, whatever. Everything is controlled narrative. It's been like this for centuries. I mean, this is just how it is in Russia. They feed you the information that they want you to know. Everything's orchestrated. Every single thing is a theatrical show. Um, what Trump is doing to the press pool is identical. I mean, first of all, his press secretary, I call her Peskova because she's really giving Peskov a run for his money with the straight lies and propaganda that she spits out.
Baghdad Bob.
But
Yeah.
At the same time, they're also sidelining the legacy media, and pushing out AP and others while bringing in propagandists and social media influencers, basically to shape the narrative that comes out from all agencies, from the White House press pool, and that's it. The reason I bring this up, another dangerous thing happened. There is a social media influencer podcaster, Tim Pool. He was on the payroll of the Russians. Um, Again, I'm not going to say I personally think wittingly, this is my opinion. When the FBI indicted the company who, Tenet Media, who was paying these influencers money that was ultimately coming from Russia, they said that potentially Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and the rest were unwitting agents of Russia. I don't believe it, because if you're an American and someone hands you what was it, $100,000
Yeah,
per
yes.
four,
Yeah.
45-minute episode. If someone hands you $100,000 and says you're going to talk about how Ukrainians are Nazis and Ukrainians are this and that
You're gonna
Ukraine,
ask. Listen, you're gonna ask. You're gonna
you're
ask.
gonna ask. I
Yeah.
mean, and this is what Tim Pool did before focusing, and Benny Johnson, and I believe the third, I don't want to say, but I think it was Dave Rubin. I'm not 100% sure. But this is what these people did. They were receiving $100,000 per episode, 45-minute podcast, to basically push Kremlin propaganda, paint Ukraine as a Nazi state that deserves to, have a genocide happening and whatnot. And anyway, the reason I bring this up, Tim Pool has now been given a press pass to the White House. So now we have someone that the FBI had in their sights, publicly put into their indictment, of taking money, whether knowingly or not, from Russia to push Russian propaganda, who is now going to be part of the press pool. And now, if you listen to the press pool, the White House briefing, which occasionally I'll turn on for a minute, the questions are getting more and more ridiculous. I mean, it's just fawning over thy leader. And that's it. It's not serious questions. You have a few. But as this process goes, as in all dictatorships, you're going to have less and less and less of CNN and Reuters and everyone else, asking questions, and more of the Breitbarts and the Tim Pools and whatever
Yeah.
other crazy podcasters there are, who, again, could be under foreign ownership and taking money from an adversary to basically, push propaganda. So this is another thing that people should have on their radar, because I mean, really, this White House briefing, and I saw this State Department briefing, the Pentagon, they all are turning so eerily similar to what happens in Russia, that it's freaking out. It's gross.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us. There are hundreds of you in this chat, and we're very, very grateful to you for doing that. Thursday, excuse me, at 11 is a random time. So we are very grateful to you guys for joining us, both here in the United States and to our friends abroad. Thank you. Stay strong. We will be friends again, our nations, hopefully, when this long nightmare
Yes.
is over. And we will see all of you again back here next Thursday for another episode of Pax Americana. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.